Welcome to the 2024 Issaquah Candidate Forum, hosted by the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah and the Issaquah branch of the American Association of University Women and the City of Issaquah. I'm Debbie Burrow, and with me is Judy Rogers, and we are your moderators for this forum. Tonight you will hear from 4 candidates for State Senate and the candidates for State Representative from both the 5th District and the 41st Legislative District. Both districts represent Issaquah in the state legislature.
The forum will begin with 2-minute opening statements. During the question and answer period, each candidate will have 1 minute for response and then a 30-second optional rebuttal from the first responder. Our timer, Kathleen Friedman here, is seated in the front row and will raise a warning when 15 seconds remain and a stop when time is up.
Questions have been formulated by the organizing committee and gathered from the community. We may choose to ask a follow-up question. We will rotate first responders to each question so that everyone has an opportunity to go first and last.
The last question for each set of candidates will come from the opposed candidates themselves. Each candidate will get an opportunity to ask their challenger a question.
Let's get started. Our first set of candidates are seeking to represent the 5th and 41st legislative districts in the state Senate. The candidates for District 5 are Bill Ramos and Chad Magandans, and the candidates for District 41 are Lisa Wellman and Jaskaran Singh Saral. In order to keep the forum friendly, we will use only first names going forward. We will begin with our 2-minute opening statements from Bill and Chad, followed by Lisa and Jaskaran.
So
Bill?
That's your cue.
Thank you for my cue. And thank you for having this forum tonight. As stated, I am your state representative, Bill Ramos. I've been serving you for 6 years, 3 terms, and before that I was on the Issaquah City Council. I'm very proud of my accomplishments and my leadership in the state legislature. And in 3 areas in particular I'd like to mention: transportation, natural resources and environment, and law enforcement. So in transportation, all you are very aware of this area, that Highway 18 has always been a thing we're most concerned about, and I have led in funding and getting that finished to a completed 4-lane divided highway. You know, the construction is going on right now at I-90, and we're working on the contract for the next piece up to the summit of Tiger Mountain, and then working on the funding for the final piece down to Issaquah Hobart Road. In natural resources, since I did spend 30 years working for the U.S. Forest Service, I lead in urban forestry and forest health with the Department of Natural Resources, and trying to make our forests more resilient and more fire resistant and keep them healthy. We don't want the big fires that we have that put smoke in the air for days, but trying to keep them managed well and healthy is the most important thing to me. And also the little thing, I did a bill that had you'll see these little green bags now that say compostable bags on them. They look like plastic, but they're not. They're compostable. And that was a bill that I did to help the environment keep plastic out of the recycling area. In law enforcement, I think the most important thing is having fully staffed law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And it was very much delayed that to get a new recruit into the training was 6 months to a 1-year wait. We opened 3 new law enforcement training centers. The 4th one will be opening next week. And that now has turned that waiting period into less than 30 days. So when a city like Issaquah has a new recruit, they can get that person into training and back out to the street as quickly as possible. Thank you.
So I'm Chad Magandans, rhymes with Haagen-Dazs. I served in the legislature from 2013 to 2017. I was immediately elected to caucus leadership. I served 2 terms as the ranking member of the House Education Committee. Prior to that, I was president of the Issaquah School Board, and I spent 12 years in the U.S. Navy before I went to work for Microsoft for about 20 years, degrees from Cornell University, and I just finished my master's degree in education at Central Washington University. My focus when I was in the legislature was education, obviously. I was one of the lead negotiators for the McCleary remedy, If you recall back at the time, we were under a Supreme Court mandate to change the way we fund our schools. And so during 8 years, we doubled state funding for schools, and that solution was ratified by the Supreme Court. I was also the sponsor for the charter schools fix, which was also ratified by the Supreme Court in 2018, that same year that the McCleary remedy was resolved. Other notable legislation, I was prime sponsor for the Washington Cybercrime Act that established new crimes like denial of service attacks and things like that, that having worked at Microsoft and the Security Development Lifecycle team, I was able to identify threat vectors and make sure that we had attacks or responses in our legislation, crimes that address those attacks. Since I've left the legislature, I've been a school teacher. I teach computer science in the Sammamish High School in the Bellevue School District. This is my 6th year teaching there. I've been endorsed by the Seattle Times in all my past House races, 5 times I think now. And I've never gotten anything less than outstanding rating from the Municipal League. And just last week, actually the press release just came out this morning, is that we had the Coalition for 5th District Mayors, and I got 5 out of the 6 mayors endorsements from them as well.
Lisa?
All right. Thank you so much. I'm Lisa Wellman, and I am your senator. I have been your senator for 2 sessions now, and it has been one of the great blessings of my life. A little bit about my background. While I started off as a teacher, I transferred to high tech, and actually, back in the day, I was a systems analyst and computer programmer on mainframes. Was then eventually, when I saw where everything was going, moved to the desktop and actually worked on Windows Point 8. And the Mac, and was eventually recruited by Apple, became head of their creative markets worldwide as vice president, and have the wonderful experience of opening up China and India for Apple products. So very excited, and working with economic development is one of the things that I really enjoy doing especially. Since I have come into the Senate, I have served as vice chair of the caucus, as well as now elected to be the chair of early learning and K-12 in the Senate. In the Senate, as opposed to the House, we put K-12 and early learning all together, that continuum, which I think is really most effective, and have worked very hard to make sure that we are transforming our system so that each and every child going through our K-12 system comes out of that with the tools that they need to thrive in a digital economy. Very different than the economy I grew up in, or even the economy that we're seeing today. It's so rapidly changing. I also sit on Energy, Environment, and Technology, and it was my bill that created the Broadband Office for the state of Washington, because as you know, broadband is a utility. It's something that we use every day, and we certainly want all of our citizens to have that access. I also have been and thanks to Issaquah and what you have done for PFAS, I also headed the drive that we had to find out about PFAS and how we could get it out of our water. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaskaran Singh Sarao. I came to this country in 2005 on H-1B visa. I'm married for 17 years. I have 2 kids, high school and middle school kids, going to public schools. So I became a citizen by choice. I didn't choose this. I was not born here. I took a responsibility to pay my taxes, to be vetted for. I followed each and every rule, and I became citizen last year. And what I've seen, waiting for so long, our system has been not the same when I came here. The policies currently made in Senate are totally failed policies around the world. What I've seen firsthand is that they're trying to make, the state is trying to control the things more than what they needed to be. This is the free world. We came here for freedom, equality, and justice for all. And that has been watering down in our state. We need a balance in our state Senate. That's why I'm running for. The public safety, good education for our kids, that's the most important thing. I'm a pro-choice, centric, Sikh values, where equality and justice for all. I'm not a career politician. I am just a regular grassroots guy who's door knocking every day, hearing the real concerns, what people need. Good schools, public safety, people need to be safe around the parks and walking on the roads. We need the basics, and we need freedom of speech. We need equality. That's why we came to this country. This country is greatest in the world because of its freedom and law and order and justice for all. Thank you.
Right, thank you all. We are going to now start with our questions. So we'll be in the order in which we are right now until we rotate. So the first question, what kind of relief measures, if any, would you support as schools work through the long-term financial impacts of the pandemic? So Bill, you have 1 minute.
That's a really good question, and we're going to work on that as we get in this legislative session. There's a lot of school districts in different settings as far as budget goes. And people forget that even in King County, we have the largest school district, of course, Seattle. But in King County, we also have one of the smallest, 40 students in Skykomish, which is in King County. So imagine across the state having school districts with 60,000 kids or 40 kids and trying to do things that fit all those school districts. It's complex, and we have to work to make sure it's balanced and that we don't continue some of the inequities that have been put into the school districts by zip code. We have to balance that out and make sure that all kids get an equal and good education. That's what matters here, and we're going to work to do that. It is our paramount duty, and the funding will come, and we'll follow that.
Right, Chad?
So there are three reasons right now why school districts are suffering. The first is that when we enacted the McCleary remedy, there was a year where we increased the state funding to the schools, but we had not decreased their levy caps. And so just for that 1 year, they had a surplus of revenue. And a lot of districts went into long-term collective bargaining, assuming that that money was going to be around past the year, and that definitely wasn't the case. The second thing is they got a lot of temporary money from the federal government during COVID, and that has also disappeared. And the third item is that statewide, we've had a 4.1% decrease in enrollment. And you could argue that a lot of that was because parents saw a little window into their classroom on their kids' laptops and didn't like what they saw. Or maybe that we kept them out of school too long. And a lot of parents wanted their kids to go to school, and they could do that with private school, but not by keeping their kids in public school. Where I work, Bellevue School District shut 2 elementary schools down last year because we just have fewer enrollment. Issaquah is in the same situation. In fact, their enrollment drop is higher than Bellevue's. Mercer Island, I think, is the top at like 12-point-something%. So yes, as we serve fewer kids, we're going to need less facilities to do that. And so we need to focus on reducing the amount of overhead that we have for each child, and we need to put them into binding conditions so that they can actually get help from the state to renegotiate contracts.
So Bill, you have optional 30-second rebuttal to Chad's comments.
I'm okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Lisa, do you need me to repeat the question, or are you all right?
No, I'm all right with
All
the
right,
question.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much, and it's something that I am working on every single day. Yes, we have had issues around registration, the head count in our schools, and they follow a 25-year cycle. So they build up to the numbers that they need, and then it usually goes down a bit. Some of it may have been due to COVID and other issues, but it's generally a 25-year cycle. I have been working on 3 specific things last year and this year, and I've already been in discussions with both the House and the Senate members about what we need. Special education, the federal government said it's a must-do, and of course we should be doing special education, but they said they'd pay for 40% of it, and they are only paying 17 of the 40% of it, and there are more kids who need those special services. Additionally, MSOC, which is your operating costs, those operating costs, for the most part, are going out on a per-student basis, but in actuality, they're market rate. So when your insurance goes up by 38%, you don't get more money if you don't have more kids. And so I'll be working on those specific things to make sure that we get that full money in this next session.
All right. Jaskaran?
So 30% of Bellevue school kids public school kids move to the private school, 22% in Mercer Island. I personally know my younger son's friend went to private school. There's a reason behind that. And we need to find out why people move to the private schools. And that's the reason the funding, $19,000 is spent on per child in our school, whereas the average for a private school in our state is 13,000. So there's a reason, and we need to find out, we have a spending problem in this state. We need accountability. We have enough resources. We have enough infrastructure. We are always there asking for the funds, but we have a problem of spending. So we need to focus on where we need to, we are getting a tax money from marijuana and other stuff, which is funding the schools. But definitely we need to look at the overspending.
Do you have a rebuttal?
I
To
do.
what?
May I say, thank you so much. Yes, I would say that we're very proud of the fact that Issaquah, Bellevue, and Mercer Island, amongst the schools of my district, are the highest rated schools in the state of Washington, so highly rated that students, to make up the difference of the students who are not there, Bellevue has hundreds of students who are now in open enrollment and are coming from Seattle to the Bellevue schools every day. Mercer Island has open enrolled 70 students to make up the difference. So that's going to help their bottom line. But there's still other things that I talked about operating costs that have gone up dramatically and that must be addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to question number 2.
You have 30 seconds to answer or no?
No. No, Lisa did the.
Lisa, get the rebuttal because you were last.
Yes.
You will get it next time.
Time. Yes,
Okay?
yep,
Yeah.
no.
Next question. What would you do about homelessness in your district? And we start with Chad.
So right now we have a bit of a supply problem when it comes to housing units. We're arguably about 1 million housing units short, and most people are estimating more than that actually. And so we need to create a situation where more people want to get into the rental housing markets, that we can provide developers opportunity to build. And a lot of the things that have been standing in the way of that are increased regulations and overhead, including a lot of permitting time and permitting costs. And so first of all, we need to make sure that our landlords feel comfortable that they can actually get paid in rent. Right now, our backlog for evictions is huge. You're looking at a year's wait in order to get an opportunity to get in front of a judge to actually evict a renter. And so I can understand why people aren't flocking to this community to become landlords, because it's a relatively hostile environment for landlords right now. We also do have the supply problem. I actually think that managed growth can be done with a new, fresh look at the urban growth boundaries and the opportunities to build in new areas, as well as build up, that have been previously restricted. But when it really comes down to it, I believe that that's a municipality decision to make, and I believe the municipality should be in charge of zoning and making those land use decisions.
Bill?
Thank you. That question is very complex, as you say, because you say homelessness, and you could talk about it one side of housing, but there's a lot of folks that need different kinds of help and not just housing. So you have to look at it on an individual basis. I believe that we have put a lot of programs in place in the last couple of years that are just starting to get to fruition. They're starting to have an impact. So I really am optimistic that in the next 2 years, a lot of this work is going to come, that we're going to help these folks, whatever their need is. Some is just money, some are other behavioral needs and substance abuse. There's all sorts of reasons. It's an individual story for every person that is homeless. We have to work with that individual to help them bridge that gap and see what they need. That takes time and it takes effort. And I believe we're starting to bridge that gap and get folks doing it the right way. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way, I'm first to admit, in this arena, and our money hasn't been as well spent as it should be, but I am optimistic for the future.
Okay. Lisa, would you address, let's switch that. Let's go with Jaskaran first,
Okay.
and if you would address homelessness in our district.
So I think the homelessness is, I have a first-hand experience. I have served at the shelters for 6 years. Every Sunday, I used to bring the food at the shelter from the Sikh temple. What I've seen, the issue is the drugs. And there's a mental health issue. We need to go to the core of the issue, why it's rising. There's the same number of people. I live close to the porch light. I see people putting the tents in Victoria now. And there's a reason. There's a drug problem. It's a big issue in our state. We need to address that. That's a major reason for the homelessness and the mental health issue. And other, the housing crisis, we have a landlocked place. We have a Smamish, and we need a easy permitting for our district so that more houses can be built. And it's so strict. I have some real estate experience too in building the houses.
Okay, and Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Yes, homelessness is an issue, and the largest cause of homelessness has been the dramatic, uncontrolled rising prices. When you speak to a mother with 3 children who was paying $1,700 a month for the rent and then is told by the landlord it's going up to $2,500 because he or she knows that they can get that money. Nobody has that money sitting around if you've been paying $1,700. And so we've seen people moved into homelessness, and really it is unfortunate. It's a situation across the United States that really must be addressed. We're trying to address it in a number of different ways. In terms of mental health and working on the drug problem, I agree that it is a significant issue, but it is also one for which we've put more money in the last few years into mental health supports across the board. We also have to make sure that people can earn a living. When you do a job, you should be able to provide for the things that you need, a home and food on the table, et cetera.
Jaskaran, rebuttal.
So I am the victim of the landlord rights. Mortgage, I am not a landlord. Bank is a landlord for me. I am just it's a 9 months. There's a squatter living in my house for 2.5 years, and state is paying for his rent because of the wrong policies. I have seen the judicial system, how the cases are handled. I went to Olympia to testify in front of housing chair, and I've seen how the wrong policies are one-sided and landlords are criminalized, whereas criminals are given upper hand.
All right, we are on to our next question. And in this instance, Lisa, you will be the first one to respond. Initiative 2117 would roll back the Climate Commitment Act. Do you support or oppose this initiative, and why?
I absolutely oppose the initiative. I oppose all the initiatives that have come on the ballot. And just to look at where did they come from? They came from a multimillionaire who is trying to roll back things that we are doing to protect ourselves and future generations. The Climate Commitment Act, as someone who comes from New York originally, way back in the day, I saw us deal with acid rain. We had fumes coming out of smokestacks, and it was causing destruction of everything. And what we did was we incentivized people to fix the problem, and putting money into it, making into it market, it did. And that's what we're doing now with the Climate Commitment Act, among other things. We are making sure that our youngsters have a habitat. It is all about having a place to live, and by incentivizing businesses to do what they should be doing and clean up their impact, their carbon footprint, we can have the hope that we will have done that for our children.
All right, Jaskaran?
So I support all 4 initiatives. Vote yes, pay less. So I came from India. I have seen the pollution. I have seen the air. This is the cleanest air we have here. And paying more taxes, affecting the family's everyday life. And I know the climate is changing, I agree with that, but paying more taxes and putting the burden on the families is an impact on everyone. And there should be a better plan. I bought an electric car. There's a lot of drawbacks where the cars are coming from, and we need abundance electricity and the charging station for that. It is a gradual change. We have to adapt. But being said that tax on the Climate Act, we need to protect water, air for our future generations.
Right, Lisa?
Thank you. We talked and we heard from the United Nations and other countries that we needed to keep the rise of climate, of heat down by 2 degrees. That ship has sailed. We are gone beyond that. And we are already seeing the climate impact across the state, across the world. And I absolutely believe that it's upon every country's responsibility to act the best that they can. This is not an impact on the consumer. It is an impact on businesses that are polluting.
Bill, same question?
Thank you for that, and I am a no on the initiative. There is a large cost to climate change that can be hidden in other ways. There are some costs here. We've been trying to deal with that. Some folks got a $250 rebate to help pay their utility bills. And also know that the oil companies are supporting a no vote on this. They are trying to transition themselves off this, and this is a help to them to do that. But the one thing they didn't want to do is open their books to us and the transparency bill we tried to pass so we could tell if they're really price gouging us or not. Because I know when I drive down to Olympia, the gas in Olympia is $1 less a gallon than it is in King County. Why is only King County very expensive? There's some other things going on here that is adding this cost. So the oil companies support the no. We do need to work with them to get transparency on pricing, and we're working on climate change to alleviate all the other costs and the health benefits that people are going to pay with climate change.
So I'm actually a big fan of capturing the external cost of environmental impact. I believe in the concept, and I think it's a good one, that if you're polluting your air and water, that you should pay the price, and that should be part of your equation when it comes to establishing profitability. The challenge I have with this particular bill, the Climate Commitment Act, is that it was a revenue grab. $2.2 billion in the first year. And if it had been offset with a reduction in the sales tax, I might have been in a position to support it. But as I see it right now, it's a revenue grab, and it's hitting the lowest income people the worst in our state. It is a regressive tax. And that $2.2 billion isn't just being generated out of nowhere. It's coming from middle class and lower income families as a greater percentage than it is the upper income. And so I don't support the initiative. I think that there are better ways that will allow us to focus more, not just on carbon, but on general air and water quality, like the mobile source air toxics and the National Ambient Air Quality Standards that will lead to better overall environment.
Bill, you have a rebuttal?
Yes, and just a mention, we have a number of neighborhoods in this area that are already suffering much more than others. If you look at Seattle and you look at the north end of Seattle and you from an aerial photo and it's just tree-lined streets, and then you look at South End where there's nothing but concrete and rooftops. We have people that are suffering because of climate change much more severely than others. And we've done a little bit starting to get some money back to folks' hands, like I mentioned, a $250 rebate for utility bills and things of that nature that are going to become part of that Climate Commitment Act as we.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If Congress were to enact a national abortion ban, what should the Washington State Legislature do? And on this one, we'll start with Bill.
That is something that worries me a lot. And thank you for that question, because people in this state tend to get a little complacent because we have been very protective of women's rights to health care. Full health care for women, that is what we're talking about here now. And that we need to keep in place. But if something like that happened that overrode our laws, we would be in trouble. We would lose that fight. So we can work towards a constitutional movement to endear the rights for women's health care in the Constitution, But that would take a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate, and that means we'd have to get both parties working together. And we've tried, and we work together on many issues very well. This is one we have not been able to work together on, so I don't see that part happening. So I'm hoping the feds don't do that. As long as they don't do that and we keep a majority in the legislature, we will protect women's health care.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, as a Republican, I'm pro-choice. In the past races, I've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I served on the Republican Advisory Committee for Planned Parenthood at the national level. I support a woman's right to choose. But Initiative 120 has been the law of the land since the 91, I think it was. And so we've had a fairly static policy when it comes to when abortions are allowed in our state. And the Dobbs decision has no effect on us other than the fact that it just validates our ability to set that law here at the state level. If they were to try to enact a federal ban, I believe the Supreme Court has already indicated that there is no constitutional basis for the federal government to be making that decision, and I would challenge them in the courts because I think that's ultimately going to support our position as a state to set that policy.
Okay, rebuttal?
Just to be clear, I forgot to mention I'm the only one in this race that is supported and endorsed by Planned Parenthood. Thank you.
Okay. Jessica Ron?
So I'm a pro-choice, and I don't think any politician should make any decision on women's. It's between women and a doctor, and it's a Supreme Court which allows a state to make a decision, and I think 40 years ago our state had voted for it, and if anyone tried to do it, it's not as per our constitution, then I'll stay the pro-choice, and it should be between the women and the doctor and his family and loved ones.
Lisa?
I am supported by Planned Parenthood, and actually quite a while ago did some work for Planned Parenthood. But I am so disturbed, as any woman should be, by what has happened with the Dobbs decision, and to see that as something that is, if you look at Trump's Project 2025, complete ban on abortions without exceptions and possibly a ban on IVF. We've had this discussion. You've heard this discussion out there. We've seen women who have died because physicians in other states have not felt comfortable handling a miscarriage, and women have died on the side of the road because of that. We have a very constructive, well thought through policy on reproductive rights in this state, but do I believe that it can be held just because we voted in the state? No, we have to get it into the Constitution, and if we have a supermajority in the Senate, I believe we can do that. The bill is ready to be passed.
And Jessica Ron, do you have a rebuttal to anything
Yes.
she said?
I think it should be rare, safe, and legal, and I will support the party both across the party lines if anything goes in that way.
All right. We're on to our next question, and it is, should school breakfast and lunch be free to all students? If so, how should the meals be funded? So we're going to start with Chad.
Yes, I do believe it should be free. Our participation in free and reduced lunch programs is very erratic, I would say, just because of the stigma of declaring that you're in a low-income state. And you see it drop off precipitously in high school because of that stigma. Frankly, it doesn't cost us much more to make meals available for all children than it does just some specific children. And so I just think the efficiencies of scale drive a more broad solution for providing those meals available for all children.
Bill.
Thank you. And yes, we have been, in the Democrats, we have been expanding the free breakfast and lunch program after the bell over the years here to try to make that part of the social structure, the part of the learning experience of the kids. So they're together, they're doing their learning, their social time together, they're getting fed like they're supposed to, and I think it's a great idea. We have been expanding that. We'll continue to get there when we get all the way across all the school districts, 100%.
Chad, do you have a rebuttal?
So I actually did sponsor the Breakfast After the Bell bill when I was in the legislature, so I've been consistent in that sport.
All right, thank you. Lisa?
Yes, of course, I support having kids receive free meals. And I was really pleased that when schools closed down on Thursday with COVID, and teachers came together on Friday and over the weekend to decide what was going to happen. On Monday, the buses went out, and the buses went out with meals. There are many places across the state where that is the only meal that kid is assured of getting. I do think that in all candor, and I think it's my job to tell you where we are, we don't have the money in the state's budget. And going forward, as I talked about the things that I'm going to try to get us to pay for, special education, transportation, et cetera, that there will not be money to be able to do that in the near future across the state. The other thing I would like to see is that the meals that we do serve, I sure as hell like them to be healthier. Thank you.
Yes.
So, yeah, I support free, but we need a data that how many kids need that free meal so that there's less wastage. That also affect our climate. We can't waste food like that. We need a data how many kids need a meal in the morning, and we should serve. Nobody should be hungry, and less food wastage. That's where I stand. I came from the country. I have seen the poverty, and we have abundance of resources if we manage it properly. Nobody in this country should go hungry. We have enough food to serve everyone, even to the rest of the world. We have a lot of resources. No wastage of food.
Right. Lisa?
I think that that's a wonderful idea. I think that that's a federal program. I don't think it is handled on the state basis. We need pragmatic solutions that work in our state. That's the job of the Senate. And that's what I try to do.
All right, thank you. We will wrap up this portion of the candidate forum with questions posed by the candidates themselves. Candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond to your challenger's question. So, Bill, we'll start with you. Please have your question for Chad.
Thank you. I'm endorsed by both teachers and responsible gun advocates. I've spoken to parents who fear sending their children to school because of the threat of gun violence. In all my conversations, absolutely no one thinks the answer to this problem is to bring more guns into the school. In the iVoter Guide, you stated that arming teachers was the correct thing to do, and that you would like to be armed and be able to use lethal force in schools. What makes you believe that the solution to school safety is arming teachers?
I don't believe it's the solution to school safety. I believe it's part of the arsenal that we can bring to the task. After Uvalde, a bunch of us teachers got together and tried to figure out how we would handle a situation like that. And we felt completely powerless to handle a school shooter. Our solution was we have baseball bats by our doors right now. If a student with a gun ever came in, we'd have like one shot to hit him with a baseball bat, and then we're at the point where we're asking our students to throw keyboards at them. I mean, we're effectively defenseless. When I was president of the Issaquah School Board, I promoted the SRO program, even after King County cut its funding. I believe that we should have an SRO in every school, and that to me is the ultimate solution. Short of that, if we can have a set of trained teachers who can respond, just like we used to respond in the Navy to, repel borders types of drills, so that we can respond quickly to a situation like that with trained personnel, I believe we should have that option. Frankly, there are very few teachers that are probably going to meet that bill and be willing to invest in the training, but I think that is one potential solution we could have there.
All right, Chad, your question for Bill.
So, Bill, you supported House Bill 1054 and 1310, which were some significant police reform bills. And because of that, you've lost a lot of support of the law enforcement agencies. I'm supported by King County Police Officers Guild, as well as WACOPS, the statewide union. Looking back, do you think that limiting police pursuit and all those other things were an effective way to fight crime? Do you believe that it was a good long-term solution to making people feel safe in their homes? And ultimately, has public safety suffered because of your pursuit of these reforms?
Thank you for that question. And
Yes, thank you. Okay. I was gonna-
all right, thank you for that question. And we have worked diligently with law enforcement to get the pursuit bill right. The one thing I know that in that process, there are some people that feel safer with pursuit bill. Some people don't. And that in our area here, in King County, most agencies here in King County have a more strict pursuit policy than we had at the state level. The problem was that nobody knew that. And the police went and told everybody that because they didn't like that we advertised it. And so it let people know something that they didn't know and previously. So that process was flawed. And that's why we went back and corrected it. And I think it's working now. I think we're going to continue talking. I am also endorsed by law enforcement, and we're continue working on that bill.
Lisa, do you have a question for Jaskaran?
Yes, I do. In the recent Republican convention, there were certain things that were brought up. And as we all probably know, that your party must support you, whether they're helping to pay for your campaigns, they're providing resources for your campaigns. They're the people who you caucus with when you get to the Senate and making sure that you can get certain bills passed and you can be effective in the Senate. So you really can't completely toss out your party's basis for whatever they have said at their convention is what they believe in. And at the Republican convention, very startlingly to me, the Republican convention disavowed democracy. They said that democracy was something that we were getting really close and that we shouldn't fall into it, which is what was happening. So they took the word democracy out of every part of their statement of beliefs. And that's your party. Do you feel that we should not support democracy, which is what your party stands for?
I support the grassroots democracy. Democracy starts from grassroots, from lower. We need to start from grassroots. We need to knock the doors. We need to talk to the voters what they need, the public safety, good education. They need the basics, the inflation, the prices of the food is up, how the pain at the gas station. These need things to be learned. Democracy starts from the grassroots. And I was reading about the President Ronald Reagan. He said the democracy, if it's working properly, it will correct itself. So it should correct itself. If real people with real issues, real stories participate, vote, everything will be fair. That's what my thinking about democracy is.
Jaskaran, your turn. A question for Lisa.
So being the chair of the education, so the grades are going down, reading and maths of kids is going down, and grades are inflated in our public school, and special need kids are provided laptops, not a one real help by the teachers. So we need to work on these policies, and you have been chair for last 8 years. And being a public school father, I have seen there are things gone down in last 4 years. So who is responsible, Senator Lisa Wellman, for that?
Well, thank you for the question. I was not chair for 8 years because we were in the minority the first year, and so they reduced the numbers of people on the committee, and I couldn't even be on the education committee, but I have been chair, honored to be asked by my caucus to chair education. I think that the things that I'm looking at as far as our schools, we did take a hit. There's no question. Across the country, there was significant disruption in education because of COVID. You have a couple of years, we had kids coming into school in third grade who had never been in school before, had not the socialization, that they would have had otherwise. Basically, the kids who were pretty much okay before, have been recovering well, but we're certainly putting additional supports into schools because we recognize that those who are struggling to begin with came out of COVID still struggling. So I'm working hard. I get up every day working for our 1.5 million kiddos across the state of Washington. It
You
is,
need to stop.
thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you for agreeing to come tonight and for agreeing to serve Issaquah and the state of Washington. Good luck to each of you as you complete your campaigns over the next few weeks.
Thank you.
We will now
Thank you.
take a short break while we prepare to meet the candidates for the 41st Legislative District Representative. If you would exit to your left, and then if you took any notes, take your notes, leave the pad of paper and the pen, and take your water bottle. Thank you so much.
Now, let's meet the candidates for the position of State Representative for District 41, and we'll use the same format as in the previous group. The candidates for District 41 State Representative Position 1 are Tana Sen and Emily Tedlock, and for Position 2, Mylin Tai and Al Rosenthal. Unfortunately, Tana could not participate tonight due to her 25th wedding anniversary. We will begin our 2-minute opening statements with Emily, followed by Mylin and Al.
Is your microphone on?
To be read.
There
we go.
Thank you.
I'm running for position 1 in the 41st Legislative District. I'm not seeking a political career. I want to turn the ship around from bad policies that are making crime rise, housing and gas and insurance more expensive, and causing parents to leave the public schools in large volumes, due in part to declining test scores and a lack of focus on academics. I will not seek the creation of a state bank to fund affordable state-sponsored housing. I will not lower the threshold on the capital gains tax from $250,000 to $15,000 to fund state-sponsored universal health care. And I will not vote to require racial quotas for hiring individuals for the Washington State Patrol. I will seek data and advice from industry and community leaders and other key stakeholders to find practical solutions that provide beneficial results. I realize that money alone will not solve the problems, but changing policies can. We have the lowest per capita police staff in the country. Why? One reason is the poorly thought out bills, such as removing police pursuit and qualified immunity for police, which your current representative supported. I will support the police and ensure the policies created help them do their job. We need transparency and accountability on where our tax dollars are being spent. If programs are not achieving desired results, then they need to be audited and reviewed. Housing First policy is not working. Homelessness is increasing. We need to follow the model of many nonprofit organizations which use a carrot-stick approach to help these individuals recover and lead independent lives. I will seek bipartisan solutions with a focus
You will
on...
have to stop. Thank you.
Mylin?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Mylin Tai. I have the honor to serve as the state representative for the 41st District, being elected in 2018. It certainly is an honor of me, who's still being the first refugee being elected to serve in Washington State Legislature. I do believe that problem can be solved by those who experience these issues the most. While serving in state legislature, that has been my values, and that has been how I worked across the aisles, work with community and organizations who come down to Olympia and meet me. I sincerely hope that I have an opportunity to meet with many of you, and if not, I am also proud that every interim during the non-elected cycle, I always host coffee time to meet with constituents. Serving on committees such as healthcare and wellness, civil rights judiciary, finance, and I used to serve in education, housing, and public safety, give me an opportunity to see how all of these issues really connect with one another. More importantly, I get to serve as a school board director for Bellevue School District prior to this role. I get to understand what it's like to be parents, and more importantly, what it's like to be students in our public school. I'm proud of that work, and I am happy to engage with you and hopefully continue the honor of receiving your vote. Thank you.
Now, let's get acquainted.
I'm a retired Boeing engineer and a hands-on commercial property owner. Let's talk about the issues. I'm for hard time for gun crime, including a 1-year mandatory sentence for carrying a gun without a permit to make criminals afraid to go out with their guns. Milantai is not. I'm for hard time for drug dealers, prosecuting major fentanyl dealers as mass murderers, which is what they are. Milantai is not. I am for required treatment in a facility for addicts that break the law. Milantai is not. She's putting them in low-barrier housing, letting them do drugs, including fentanyl. That's how they lost their jobs, and that's how they lost their homes. Milantai is for high gas prices. I am not. It hurts the poor, the middle class. Per AAA, Washington has the 3rd highest gas price in the country, $1 above average, $1 above Massachusetts, which is a solid Democrat state. It's because of taxes, carbon, and extreme regulation. Milantai is for men who identify as women using the women's locker room. Picture a woman sitting. That was 2 minutes?
Yes, sir. All right, we're going to start with our question, and the order is going to be Milan, Al, then the rebuttal, if you have one, and then Emily. Question is, our state has taken significant steps to improve crisis response, yet continues to fall behind on services that keep people from getting to crisis in the first place. How will you prioritize prevention and early intervention services?
Thank you so much for that question. I did not share with you my other area of training. I am a trained pharmacist, graduated from University of Washington. Right after graduation, I committing to working with King County Public Health because I do believe an ounce of prevention would bring us further down the road. To your point, we have put a significant focus in preventions and build capacity for crisis response. We moved the needle from not having mobile crisis response to having many across our state. The barriers and the challenges that we continue to look at and recognize are around workforce. And because of that, I am working with our local high school, with our local college to get to the workforce situation. Thank you.
Great. Al.
Repeat the question.
Yes. Our state has taken significant steps to improve crisis response, yet continues to fall behind on services that keep people from getting to crisis in the first place. How will you prioritize prevention and early intervention services?
Well, number one of the main things that causes the crisis is the drug problem. We're not prosecuting major fentanyl dealers like we should. A few months ago, one was prosecuted in Tacoma, had 100,000 fentanyl pills. He had 1.7 kilos of fentanyl powder, and he had 5 guns. One handgun was a full auto. He got less than 7 years. That person should have been put in jail and never seen again because he's a mass murderer. That's one of the crisis problems that we're not handling and we could simply handle by being tougher on drug dealers. Another problem we have is we don't have enough police officers. That's because we've totally demoralized the police officers with the laws that we put in. And right now, to be a police officer, you have to worry about just doing your job, that you could be prosecuted for murder, unlike a lot of other states where it wouldn't happen.
All Rebuttal?
No, thank you.
All right. Emily, same question?
All right, I agree with Al that we have a fentanyl problem and a drug use problem, and that is causing a lot of these crises. And we also have a mental health issues, and we have only 2 mental health institutions in the state, and Eastern State and Western State lost its certification. So I would work to getting that recertified, because that would be, and I would also make the knowing possession of fentanyl a Class A felony. And I think that would solve a lot of the issues, some of the many crises that are occurring.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Can you give us an example of something you've accomplished while working with an individual or group with whom you had significant differences? And we'll start with Al.
I have differences all the time when I'm negotiating leases on commercial properties, and we come to an agreement that both people are happy with, or the other time would be when you're going to buy a commercial property. The owner always wants more, the buyer wants less, and you negotiate a price. I've had a lot of experience reading legal contracts because of my commercial background. That's about all I could say.
Milan?
Thank you for the question. As you know, I am the prime sponsored and worked to pass the working family tax credit, which the policy was sitting on the shelf for over a decade. And when I was asked to sponsor the piece of legislation, I knew this piece of policy will impact everyone in Washington state, especially our working families and working people across the state. The first thing I've done was to reach out to the Republican, both in the House and in the Senate. I asked to have individual conversation with them, and I asked to engage with leadership in both chambers. In that, I've learned what their concerns are, recognizing that each one of us do represent our constituents who gifted their vote to elect us and serving them. So that is my experience, and I value it.
Okay. Al, do you have a rebuttal?
Oh, yeah. Milan likes to talk about how she is happy to give handouts to lower-income people, which I can see helping people. But what she doesn't talk about is she's for the carbon tax, which adds 50 cents a gallon to gas. And a lot of poor people have cars that are less efficient. They drive far for jobs. They live in Auburn, work in Bellevue. So she, in one hand, she's giving to them, in the other hand, she's taking away.
Emily?
Okay, the question was, how do I resolve conflict, I guess?
Yeah, give us an example of how you've been working with an individual or group with whom you had significant differences.
Okay. Well, I'm the third child of 4 children, and so I had a lot of arguments with family, and I used to be Democrat, now I'm Republican, so I think I have the ability to look at things differently. I also was a litigation paralegal and worked, some of the litigation we did was with high-end divorces, so people getting a divorce are not happy with each other, and we would have to divide the property in a fair way. And then also I'm the chair of the 41st Legislative District, and we had our caucus, and people wanted different people for president, and I had to be balanced and make sure everyone's voice got heard.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Judy?
All right. Washington's tax system is the most regressive in the U.S., with the poorest residents paying percentage-wise nearly 6 times as much as their personal income in taxes as the wealthy. Do you support Initiative 2109, which would roll back the capital gains tax on incomes over $400,000, and why? And we're going to start with Emily.
So I think the capital gains tax has caused businesses to leave the state, And I do think that we need to find fair ways to raise funds and have taxes to fund the government. But I think I would start with trying to cut some costs and some bloat. There's, for example, a lot of bloat in our schools, our public schools. And Seattle is actually half of the $23,000 per student, by the way, in Seattle, and they still are having to close 1 out of every 4 schools. And half of their budget, I believe, is for administrators. So I support all the initiatives. I say yes, pay less, because I think we need to audit government programs and reduce waste, and I know that we can do that. And I also believe in public charter schools, which have less bureaucratic rule and less administrative
You will have to
costs.
stop. Thank you. Milin?
Thank you very much. I do not support the initiative. You're right. Washington State, before the passing of capital gain tax and working family tax credit, was ranked 50th in the nation when it's come to our tax system. After the passing of capital gain tax and the working family tax credit, we moved from 50th to 49th. And I'm happy to share with you the resource where that's from. I commit to continue working to right that wrong. I believe that people who work hardest deserve the services and deserve the same privilege as everybody else, and those who make the most should pay an equal fair share. And when we talk about equal fair share, meaning if I pay 14% of a total tax, those who top 1% should
You will
pay the
have to
same.
stop.
Thank you.
Al?
I definitely support the initiative. What the capital gains tax does, good example, is Jeff Bezos left the state right after it was passed. Why do you think he left? So if you chase out all our multimillionaires and billionaires, what kind of tax revenue are you going to have? When Jeff was here, he spent a lot of money, paid a lot of sales tax. By making him leave, you've actually reduced income for the state. I find it hard to believe we're that regressive, because there are a lot of other states without an income tax. And personally, I think the capital gains tax is an income. Anybody ever fill out a federal tax form? Is capital gains part of your income tax? Yes, it is. So how do you classify a capital gains different than an income tax? An income tax is not legal in our state.
Okay. Milin?
Thank you. If the argument is income tax or capital gain tax, let's put income tax aside, we constitutionally not allowed. If capital gain tax drive billionaires, millionaires out of our state, let's take a look at California and New York. Thank you.
Okay, next question. I think we've addressed this a little bit in some of your opening statements. All of you say that you support public safety, all of our candidates. I haven't heard anybody say they don't. But what does that mean to you, and how will you actively address it? In this case, we start with Milin.
Thank you. As a refugee, I left my country because my family did not feel safe living under the communist government. Public safety is utmost important. Anytime our safety is being violated, it's get to us, to our core. I want to make sure that each and every one of us feel safe, not those who get to live in gated community feel safe. Not only those who can afford, especially our business, our small business, who can afford hiring security, to drive around their area of work, feel safe. I believe that all of us deserve to feel safe, and because of that, we need to listen to all of those who have the least protection.
Al?
Well, Millen says she's for public safety, but one of the laws she was for was the pursuit law. And initially, that pursuit law, if a police officer saw a murder get committed, he was not allowed to chase the murderer until he got permission from supervision. That makes us a lot less safe when people know they can run. The other thing in that pursuit law that she was all for was car theft doubled after that was passed. Now, yes, the Democrats passed that initiative just now that was going to go to a vote in November because they didn't want to be embarrassed by how badly the pursuit law was going to be overridden by the initiative. It wasn't because they wanted to. They saw the writing on the wall that it was going to be badly beaten.
Okay, rebuttal? No, no rebuttal. Okay, Emily.
I keep on doing that. So yeah, we need to fund the police and increase funding for the police. We need to increase the staffing levels because a lot of them have left. And we need to give them new equipment. I know that there was a Senate bill that the current legislature didn't pass that would have given them more body cameras. And sorry, I don't have in my notes here, but there was a bill that was brought before the legislature that would have given them some additional equipment that they needed, but it didn't pass. So we need to increase hiring and training. But more importantly, we need to change the bad policies that, for example, remove the qualified immunity. I mean, if I was a policeman and I didn't have qualified immunity, I wouldn't want to do my job. I mean, they have very stressful situations. Just think about the police, the calm, cool police, Bellevue police that went and found the people who had a bomb in their car and chased them down Bellevue Way here in the 41st Legislative District and closed I-90 for several hours. So hire more police and also have consequences for the judges that are letting people out.
Okay. All right. Next question. If elected, what is the #1 thing you hope to say you accomplished at the end of the 2025 session? And we will start with Emily.
I would hope to expand. Well, in 2012, the legislature approved the funding of public charter schools, and they receive public funds, and I think that they have more flexibility in the curriculum, and so they're really good for children that have special needs. And there are also, if your child is really into tech, there's a public charter school in Vancouver that's doing really well. It's called Vancouver Rooted. And so I would hope to increase the public charter schools because they are, in 2012, they were authorized, and the current legislators have been holding up some of the funding for that.
Al?
I'd want to improve schools with a free market. I'd want the money to follow the child. Just like you wouldn't want one government-owned grocery store, the prices would be high and the quality would be bad. Good example of where government money is spent in the private sector is Medicare. You get your Medicare money and you can go to any private doctor you want versus something like the Veterans Administration, which would be government-run and you'd get very bad care. That's the comparison to what we have now. Our current school policy, where you either go to public school or you pay everything when you go not to public school, is the comparison of our public schools is the Veterans Administration. If you had a free market, it'd be like Medicare, where you're happy to the private with the private doctors you go to. One other thing I could say is housing. We need to improve the cost of housing by reducing regulations. Everything we're doing now costs more for somebody else.
Millen?
Thank you for the question. I will admit I'm greedy. I want a lot to be done. It's going to be a long session. We have been working by engaging and listening and seeking data in order to prepare ourselves into 2025 session. It is going to be a difficult session. But if there is one thing that I will put my heart into working and ensuring its success is to improve the mental behavior care for our school. For our school, who are the staff who are working in the school, the adult working in the school, for the students who are in our school system, because after the pandemic, let's face it, we all have gone through the biggest trauma in century. And by recognizing it, we got to figure out how to build the support system our entire community deserves.
Al?
So Meelan says she wants to improve it, but she doesn't say anything about how. Everybody wants to improve it. Going back to what I was saying about housing, all of the things that we do for low-income housing, we're making other people spend more, either in taxes or the builders cost more. We need to reduce regulations that doesn't cost anybody money.
Okay, our last question. What can be done to improve our forested lands and help prevent forest fires? And on this one, we start with Meelan.
Thank you so much. Forest is our lung. It provides so much capacity to clean our air. And I have been, during being in the legislature, I have been working with the commissioner for our public land to hear from them what their needs so that they can do their job well. To ask the questions, especially the question that elevated from my constituent in the 41st district, of how we can together build the capacity to support our forest and protect our forest so that it continue to be a place where many of us get to enjoy, whether it's the state park, county park, city park, and for some of those are federal land.
I think we should try to get a lesson from the private landowners. It seems that public lands have a lot more fires on them than the private land, large private lands. I believe they do more to prevent fires by cutting areas of the forest so that the fire can't spread, cutting I don't know, not a road, but a width of the forest to stop it from spreading. For some reason, public lands aren't maintained the way private ones are to prevent fires. One of the other things that's causing fires is the forests are growing faster. According to NOAA, the world is 30% greener than it was 60 or 70 years ago because of higher CO2 in the air. So you get more growth, which is probably increasing the fuel for fires.
Meelan, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I believe that we in Washington State have done a tremendous work. Especially, I really would like to shout out and give the credit to our current Public Land Commissioner. She have working tirelessly with the state legislature to really provide all the tools needed so that the people who fight fire having all the resources to protect our land.
Okay, Emily.
Okay, I love the forest and I love old growth forests, but we do need to responsibly manage our forest assets, and wildfire, when we do not manage the forest, we get dead trees and disease, and then when they cause wildfires, they can cause wildfires. And then if we're worried about carbon, by the younger the trees between 30 and 80 years old are more carbon sequestering. So by harvesting our forest, we are actually creating more carbon sequestering trees and preventing wildfires. By the indigenous people would have create breaks in the forest so that so I would say that we need to harvest our forest and in a responsible way. That's it.
All right. We are now to the portion of the candidate forum where you will pose a question to your opponent. Candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond to your challenger's question. Milin, please begin with your question for Al.
Thank you very much. As I hope you have heard in the last few minutes that we spent together, I am about building capacity for building community. I am about engaging with people, and we get to be sitting in this seat in the last, counting this time is 3 election cycle. So Al, would you commit to working with me so that we can find solutions solving some of the difficult issues that our state is facing? Thank you.
I've listened to yes several times, both at the Issaquah debate and other debates. And what gets difficult to work with someone who hardly says anything. They speak, but then they don't say anything of substance. It's like if I was in an engineering meeting and I spoke the way you do, and at the end, when you get done speaking, a lot of times it's like, so what of substance did she say? If you want to talk and negotiate or make a point, you need to say something of substance.
All right. Al, your question for Milin.
For Republicans to change abortion law in Washington, they would have to control all 3 parts of the Washington government. And even then, extremely restrictive abortion would be overturned by referendum or initiative. I am not for extreme abortion restrictions. Extreme abortion restrictions will never happen in Washington. The abortion issue will never affect my vote for the above reasons. Milin, why do Democrat ads keep attacking Dave Reichert about abortion? As governor, he could never change the abortion law, and the federal government should never be able to change our abortion law, because I'm a believer in states' rights, and the 10th Amendment would not allow that.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you so much for supporting the right to choose of all the people who are pregnant. And beyond that, thank you for supporting the idea and the ideal that everyone deserves the healthcare services that they need. You're asking me about a position of somebody against somebody else. Unless I signed under those attacked act, I would not dare and feel unprepared to even be able to respond to that question. So my apology for unable to answer the question.
All right. Emily, if your opponent was here tonight, what question would you have for her?
Well, I would like to just explain that I'm for fostering small business growth instead of the growth of government. And I believe the free market, where there's healthy competition, as Al mentioned, often provides better solutions for insurance and health care. So I don't really have a question for Tana, but I want to point out a difference, because I want to use as many free market approaches so we have competition and better results.
All right. Thank you, candidates. Good luck to each of you as you complete your campaigns over the next few weeks. And if you were here earlier, you know that we will now take a short break while we prepare to meet the candidates for the 5th Legislative District representatives. So you will, again, exit to your left. Thank you very much.
Let's meet our next set of candidates seeking to represent the 5th Legislative District in the state legislature. For position 1, we have Victoria Hunt and Mark Hargrove, and for position 2, Lisa Callan and Patrick Peacock. We will begin our 2-minute opening statements from Victoria and Mark, followed by Lisa and Patrick. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Victoria Hunt, and I am running for the 5th Legislative District, Position 1 in the House of Representatives. I am currently serving my third term on the Issaquah City Council, and I have so enjoyed and been honored to serve my community in this capacity. Before I was on the City Council, I was teaching in the University of Washington Urban Design and Planning Department. And there I was teaching about how we can grow sustainably and meet our community's needs for housing and services while also protecting our beautiful natural areas, which I believe make this part of the country and the world really the most beautiful place to live and to raise a family. And so I was learning about that, and I had moved to Issaquah as the place where I wanted to raise my children, and I wanted to give back to my community. So I volunteered on our Planning Policy Commission, and from there, I went for an appointment at the City Council and have since been reelected twice to continue serving in this capacity. With the opening at the state level, I wanted to continue to serve and work on issues that impact our community members and my neighbors all across the district. These include housing affordability and childcare affordability, as well as protecting our natural spaces, clean air and clean water, working to make sure that all of our students have a public education that sets them up for success later in life, and protecting our reproductive rights. I'm extremely honored to be endorsed by 7 in-district mayors, and it really speaks to my collaborative approach. I want to work with the community, with our cities, with our elected officials, and really make sure that I am deeply understanding the issues, deeply understanding the community's perspective, and serving you. Thank you.
Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Hargrove. I'm running for position 1. I am an Air Force Academy graduate, a veteran Air Force pilot, and a fairly recent retiree Boeing instructor pilot. I've been married to my wife Sandy for 45 years, have 2 married daughters that both live pretty close to us, and that way we get to enjoy the 7 grandchildren that also live close to us. I was in the legislature for 4 terms, 8 years, in the 47th district, the neighboring district just to the west of us here. And a few years ago, the district boundaries changed, so the area where I live got incorporated into the 5th district. And so this opportunity came up for me to run, and it's still representing my neighbors, so it's a real treat to do that. I won't get too much into the issues, but I will mention that during my term in the legislature, it's kind of interesting that my seatmate was Democrat Majority Leader Pat Sullivan, which is very interesting because we had both sides of the political spectrum. But I think it speaks to my ability to stick to my principles, but work with the other side. And hopefully I will get into the legislature and balance things out a little bit, make things a little bit better for the whole state.
Okay, Lisa?
Hi, I'm excited to be here, and thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for doing this with every campaign each year to make sure that you give the voters across the 5th Legislative District an opportunity to hear from all the candidates running. I was first elected in 2018 and very excited to serve and very humbled and honored to serve as your state representative for the last 3 terms. I have focused my work in the legislature on our children, on education, health and human service issues, mental health issues, as well as infrastructure, housing, affordability, and where we need to go next in terms of supporting our cities and our communities and making sure our small businesses have opportunities, especially coming out of the pandemic. And then, of course, our environment and our healthcare and reproductive rights, and making sure that we're holding to reducing gun violence. The list goes on because these are the issues I'm hearing from all of you. These are the issues that affect us in our neighborhood. They affect our quality of life and our ability to thrive, and our businesses' opportunity to keep our economy strong in Washington State. I hope for your vote, and am pleased to have a broad endorsement of the electeds across the 5th Legislative District, endorsed by firefighters, endorsed by teachers, endorsed by Internal Order Police, and was endorsed by the Seattle Times just today. So very excited to have all of that, and again, honored to continue to do deep work for you, because I'm out in community paying attention to what you need and listening to what you need, and that includes our city councils, that includes our any of our state associations, but very much includes our neighbors. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again for the opportunity.
Patrick.
Yes, I'm Patrick Peacock, again running in the 5th Legislative District for position 2 for state representative. My big concern is, you can see it all on my signs, let's do what works. That's the most really important thing to me. It's very easy to have a lot of ideologies and a lot of wish lists of things that you want to accomplish. It's often and usually completely different to find those solutions and find things that work. Now, one, I'm a longtime resident of what encompasses LD5, 5th generation to be exact. I remember when Issaquah was mostly farmland and hay, but so I have a very deep-rooted understanding of the area and the history of the area and where we've been and where we're going to go. I'm also a warrant officer in the Army, and a lot of people don't understand that warrant officers are commissioned officers who are subject matter experts who write policies and procedures for the commanders to achieve missions. And we have to, in that arena, we have to be effective or else the mission fails. And that's a lot of what I'm seeing. I hear a lot of ideals. I hear a lot of wish lists of we want to solve this problem, that, but I don't see a lot of effective solutions being put into place. That's very, very much why I'm running. In addition to being a warrant officer, I also have an MBA, and I have a financial emphasis and spent quite a bit of time looking at economics and monetary policies and capital structures and such, and to find solutions that work. So I think I've got the tool set, I've got the history, and I'm more than willing and happy and hope we can do good things. Thank you.
And thank you. I'm sure the voters appreciate hearing from you personally. Let's start with the first question. It's been more than 30 years since the Growth Management Act was approved. If you could, what changes would you make to it? And we'll start with Victoria.
Thank you. The Growth Management Act, as you mentioned, has been in place for 30 years, and it concentrates growth in urban growth areas. And so I do think it is an important framework for our cities to be growing. And we're in a very rapidly growing region. That said, I know that some cities are struggling to keep up with the infrastructure demands from that population growth. And so what I would like to focus on working within the Growth Management Act is making sure that we are incentivizing and that we are rewarding those cities that are adding growth and that are adding housing and that are making for more walkable cities, that are adding transit-oriented development, and really make sure that we're incentivizing that, but that we're also giving those cities tools to achieve that kind of growth.
Well, what changes would you make?
Incentives and rewards for those kinds of practices.
Okay, Mark?
Mine's a little easier answer to articulate because the Growth Management Act is horrible. It's we know that what's going on with the house prices, it's very simple, supply and demand. And when you limit the area where people can build houses, it significantly reduces the supply and therefore the prices go way up. So I think I like the idea of modifying it, but I don't think it's salvageable. I think it actually has to be done away with. We can come up with something else. I do understand its intent. The idea is to prevent urban sprawl, but what it's doing is the only solutions that I've been hearing recently is within the Growth Management Act is to split lots, make them smaller, cram people into more smaller spaces. And I'm going, I just don't think people want that. I mean, most people want a house with a yard, and so I think it's time to move on to something else.
Victoria, you want to rebuttal on that?
I think there are needs across the housing spectrum. We have done a community survey in the city of Issaquah, which I know particularly well, having served on the city council. And from those surveys, we know that there is a demand for those smaller units. And so adding those smaller units, especially where we already have transit and where folks are going to be able to walk to their local businesses, that is also a need and something that I think we can work towards.
Lisa, what changes would you make to the Growth Management Act?
It's interesting because I've had quite a few conversations with constituents that have, my phone number is readily accessible on the campaign trail, and folks are calling me and talking to me about this. And I've had folks in unincorporated King County. Actually, it was in the same day, and it was about 3 hours apart, where I had one constituent that was all about, you gotta get rid of the GMA. You gotta allow more growth because the affordability of housing is killing all of us everywhere. And then the next call that I had was about, my neighbors are selling their lots and they're building out, and that's not why I moved out to, unincorporated King County, and the density needs to go into the cities. It needs to, and make those arguments. So for me to figure out what is the best thing to represent our district and the needs in our district and housing affordability, specifically on the comprehensive plans, we need to, I agree with incentivizing and making sure we're bringing in the growth, and work with a pathway in I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Patrick.
I'll get my timing down.
It's a really interesting history with the Growth Management Act. When I was younger, we didn't have most of the cities that we currently do in LD5, and most of those cities incorporated because of the Growth Management Act so that they can write their own laws. So you have kind of a law that, again, it doesn't work because it has some stated goals, but then it doesn't really achieve those stated goals because there's always a reaction. When you have a growing population, you have housing, whether or not you grow up in one place, you're trading one problem for another. So you have to kind of look at it. The one thing I would change specifically is I would work with the city mayors more. The city mayors are, they're the CEOs, they're executives of their own cities. That's why a lot of these incorporated, so they can take control back. So I would want to change the Growth Management Act so the inconsistencies aren't there, there's not mixed messages, and work much more with the cities and the mayors on what they want to do with their own land.
Okay. Rebuttal, Lisa?
Thank you very much. So working with our cities is absolutely what we need to do, and figuring out how to best find a pathway to increase density and housing within the urban growth areas. What do we do when that just doesn't happen for our cities, and what's the pathway in that regards? I think we have to find a balance.
All right, next question. What can you and the legislature do to reduce gun violence in our state? So we're going to start with Mark.
I think the thing that comes to mind for me is that we have a mental health crisis in our state, and we've got, and it goes beyond just the crazy guy in the corner, but our societal structure is falling apart. Families are the bedrock of our society, are not holding together. All of these factors that lead to the mental health situation, and I think that's where we need to put our focus on getting us back to healthy relationships, and that'll lead to less gun violence.
Victoria?
Thank you. I'm extremely honored to be a Gun Sense candidate, awarded that by the Moms Demand Action Group. And through that work, I know that there are a number of improvements that can be made through state law, especially around safe gun storage, making sure that guns are not in the hands of people who should not have those guns, and making sure that additionally that there are no loopholes in terms of who is able to get those guns in the first place. I also think that a holistic approach is definitely important. We do see that there are a number of needs in the behavioral health space and mental health space for not only gun violence, but for making sure that we're addressing community concerns to reduce violence overall in the communities. Thank you.
Mark, you have a rebuttal?
Just briefly, the gun storage thing. I know when I was in the legislature, there was a very common topic, and we do need to be concerned about that. We do have to be careful that we don't impose on Second Amendment rights, and the homeowner that needs rapid access to a gun to protect their property and their family, and so on. So we have to use caution if we go in that direction.
Patrick?
Well, like any problem, you have to break it down into its parts. Okay, there's not a one size fits all when it comes to violence in general, and guns is that that problem as well. So, I mean, if you're talking about gun violence in certain terms of male suicides, which is the number one way males commit suicide, then you've got a mental health issues, and you have to look at the issues of young men. If you've got gang gun violence, then you need to look at some sort of crime deterrence or some neighborhood watches, or I mean, you have to analyze what the root cause of the gun violence is first and address that. And that's not a one size fits all. So you have to address each issue and identify what is the number one cause of the gun violence and address that specifically.
Lisa?
Thank you. I also am endorsed as a gun sense candidate and greatly appreciate and an honor to have that, and have worked on legislation and voted in favor of gun safety legislation that's moved through during my 3 terms. I think the next step is, and certainly having a strong conversation around moving forward to storage and requiring storage on gun owners. I think there's a way to do that, to do it in a way that meets the gun owners' goals and criteria for feeling safe, but to also keep everybody else safe and to keep those that are in their family from unintentionally getting access to those guns. I think training and making sure that there is a training on a purchase and making sure you're not having somebody that's just picking up a gun and then doesn't actually have any framework or understanding about even the context of how you handle the gun when you're around other people. And then, of course, absolutely working on the social factors that we're out there. I'm doing that full time in the legislature.
Thank you. And then, Patrick, you have a...
My only question would be is a lot of what we're talking about is making rules against legal gun owners. And I don't know if that's necessarily the root cause or the number one cause of gun violence is from law-abiding citizens that are going to abide by your laws. So my question would be is if you are talking about gun violence, these gun safety issues are they're great measures, but is that really going to stop the gun violence when most of the guns are illegally owned by people who are willing to do violence? So are you really addressing the cause of the violence?
Okay, next question. We've asked this question to the Senate candidates, but it's an important one, so now it's your turn. Initiative 2117 would roll back the Climate Commitment Act. Do you support or oppose this initiative, and why? And we will start with Lisa.
Thank you. I oppose the initiative. The Climate Commitment Act was a multi-years in coming and well negotiated and well balanced out to really bring the top polluters in Washington state to help pay for the cleanup and the toxins and the carbon that we're facing as a state to bring our clean air and our clean water to bear. If that is repealed, the dollars that we have to actually target the mitigations and remediations that are necessary for us to have the environments that we want to live in Washington state go away. Our ability to actually structure and protect our forests. I think that was a question in the previous debate. How do we actually take care of any of those things? How do we build out our multimodal? How do we take care of our fighting our forests in a way that is going to support them? I thought I had 15 seconds. I guess it ran away. Sorry about that.
Patrick?
Yeah. No, she did. She still had 15 seconds.
I'm sorry, I misread the sign.
It's all good. So again, it's about also using those investments for the workforce that we need to make sure that we've got the workforce behind it and the workforce training and the job pathways and careers that we want, and building out the green economies that we need as well, and the other energy sources that we need to make all of this happen.
Okay,
now. Yes, I support the initiative, and it comes down to what works. If what the stated goals of the Climate Commitment Act, if the money did go directly into climate commitments, then I would, take a look at it. But it doesn't. About a third of it goes to roads, and nobody can explain to me how building more roads or fixing roads is going to help the environment. About a third of it goes to overhead, and about a third of it goes to research. So yes, there's a portion of it, but we're talking about at a cost of 50 cents per gallon, for roughly or so. And not only does that come out of your pocket of people that are already struggling with the cost of living, but it has a super or even a hyperinflationary effect. So if you're going to have to prove to me, and that hasn't been done, that it's going to achieve its goals if you're going to impose that kind of draconian cost to your citizenry.
Lisa, I bet you have a rebuttal.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. We talk a lot about the 50-cent gas tax increase, and we can debate whether that's true or not. I think there is a big debate about whether that's true. But there's steps that we need to we need the financing in order to continue to move forward to do the work to make this better, which means doing the combined carbon markets that we're doing, building out our EV infrastructure to get more cars in a cleaner fuel in a cleaner way. So if we're doing all of this work, then it's not about the 50 cent. It's about the clean air, the clean water, and what we need to do to make sure that we can thrive and our children can thrive for generations to come.
Okay, Victoria, how about you?
Thank you. I strongly oppose the initiative 2117. And we've seen in our communities already the impacts of climate change. So this is not a hypothetical. We are at increased flooding risk. We have seen increased costs of insurance, for example, for fire, for home insurance. And that's because we're at increased risk of fire and of wildfire, which can be devastating to communities. And further, we're seeing already increased smoke days so that folks can't go outside in our beautiful Pacific Northwest summers and enjoy summer days when there's poor air quality. And for our folks that work outside, this is an additional concern. I am very much in support of the Climate Commitment Act, which makes our polluters pay for efforts to reduce these human-caused sources of climate change. And this money is flowing back into our communities directly.
Mark?
I love this kind of question because it's very clear. We've got very different opinions. Yes, absolutely support this. 50 cent per gallon. I don't think it's debatable because I think we all see it. It's very, very clear, and it's predicted to go even higher. Let's see what else. Oh, we see the impact just at the pump, but we also see the impact on everything else. Everything else that gets moved around the state or whatever, that costs money because of the increased price of gas. Also, if America is a very clean country, and Washington State is a very clean state. If we think that we need to tighten down more, but meanwhile other states are not tightening down, China is not tightening down, whatever, we're going to have our little impact, and we're placing a huge burden on my neighbors, the people that I hope to represent. But it has that little impact, and yet all around us, people are not doing that.
Okay, you want to rebut that?
Thank you. Yes, I would. We know that the oil and gas companies are making record profits in our region, and this is something that I would want to work on as a legislator. I believe there are additional accountability measures that we can put in place so that they are not taking advantage of people and raking in these record profits. Additionally, I wanted to add that we have seen this money flow back into the community in terms of electrifying school buses, community solar, and more.
For this next question, some of you have already mentioned mental health and behavioral health. So this question is, how would you address the mental and behavioral health workforce shortage? So we'll start with Patrick.
Well, like with anything, if you have a shortage of something, you subsidize it. So if you have a specific demand for a certain field, in this case, mental health professionals, then you find a way of subsidizing it through the schooling or provide for to go into that field.
Okay, Lisa?
So there's been several actions taken, in particular just in this last biennium that I worked on, and in particularly around workforce, not only for children, youth, behavioral health, and mental health but also for adults. So we worked on, and I sponsored a bill on the House that was passed through the Senate version for a behavioral health support specialist, which is an undergraduate level degree, a certification program that allows you under supervision. That's the word I'm looking for. Sorry, under supervision of licensed MDs and master's level licensed practitioners. We can extend their ability to serve and the number of people that we're doing. So that's one area. We did conditional scholarships and trying to build that out so that we're getting the highest need in the highest areas. We have a social worker program for schools where we're building out and partner with federal dollars to bring in more social workers in our schools.
All right. Patrick?
We pretty much said the same thing in different ways of if you want to increase the number of people, then you provide opportunities, you provide grants, you provide scholarships, you provide a means to increase that. So we're essentially saying the same thing, so there's no really rebuttal.
All right, great. Mark?
Like anything, I think that you just need to make it attractive, which is, I'm going to just add on to this. This is kind of question I don't like because we're kind of very similar. Anyway, make it more attractive, and I do think it's important that in high schools that we make, and this applies to a whole bunch of different jobs, that we make high schoolers aware of this kind of thing. I can imagine a high schooler thinking, oh man, I don't want to be a counselor just sitting in an office all day being boring or whatever. But if you motivate them, showing what great good they would be doing in society, how they can actually change the world by this career, and explain to them what is available to them, then I think that would go a long way toward filling more of them.
Yes, Victoria.
I absolutely agree that workforce development for individuals with this specialty is very important. I also have seen firsthand the value of co-response programs where folks with mental and behavioral health specialties are able to respond with or in lieu of police when there's a call for service in the community and there's somebody experiencing a crisis, but there is not a crime being committed. And so I very much would want to expand on the success of those programs that are in our region already and make sure that cities across the region have those resources to have those programs. One additional benefit of having caseworkers in the cities with this expertise is that they're able to build long relationships with the community and become trusted sources of resources and information, which is extremely valuable.
Mark, you have anything else to add?
It's not a rebuttal, but the term expanding success. I think that's great. We find the things that work, build on those, beef them up.
Okay, and our last question, Mark, this is for you because you want everyone to have a different opinion. So it's not really an opinion, and there won't be rebuttals on this one. It's about you. What areas of the budget do you think your unique experience and perspectives will help you contribute in a positive way in deliberations in the legislature?
Well, as I mentioned before, because my situation with Pat Sullivan being my seatmate, I think that shows something. When I was, excuse me, new in the legislature, I heard that the chair of the committee that I was going to be assigned to said, "I get the feeling he's really conservative, but I like him." And I think that says something, and as a result, I ended up being not the vice chair, but the assistant ranking member on that committee, just because it just showed I'm a guy that you can work with, but we'll stick to convictions and so on. So I think that's my greatest asset.
Okay, Victoria?
Thank you. I have a PhD in ecology, and I also currently work as a chief data officer for a company that works in the climate change and climate action space. And so I think that one skill set that I would like to bring is that professional experience, especially looking at how much bang for the buck we can get for different infrastructure investments, and really looking at how do we make sure that we're prioritizing in the budget to build out the infrastructure that supports the community's needs. So that would be one area, and particularly in the clean energy space, we have a lot of infrastructure that we will need to build to achieve our current goals, and I would like to work on making sure that we do that in the most cost-effective way possible.
Lisa?
Actually, that was one of the things that called out in the Seattle Times was my budget experience that I've had both in capital budget as vice chair and being one of the budget writers in the House on writing the capital budget for infrastructure. So I want to continue pushing how we build out our capital dollars that not only creates a huge amount of jobs for Washington State and Washingtonians and stability in the workforce, but also promotes affordable housing, make sure that we can stay connected to our early learning facilities and meet the needs that we have across the spectrum on all of these areas that we're driving. And then with the seat on appropriations, I have this opportunity to connect and leverage the work that we're doing and spending in our operating dollars with what the timing and the right timing is for our investment and capital dollars. So as we're building out behavioral health workforce, as we're building out services across the continuum of behavioral health, which facilities do we need where and when, that can be responded to in the capital budget. So that leverages my connection on top of course, my education expertise.
And Patrick, how about you?
For me, it comes back to that theme of doing what works. Okay, if you're going to spend the money, you have to make sure that whatever it is you're spending the money on, it works. And that's an integral part of the budget. I mean, you can get really lost into, the numbers of the budget and the capital, but is what the dollars you're spending on being effective? And there needs to be somebody, a voice in the room that has the background in in the MBA, in finance, in economics, that can take a look at the whole picture. And even when it comes to tax structures, like if you're trying to maximize your revenue, well, how are you going to maximize your revenue without affecting your economy? Maybe a short-term term, like the previous ones was talking about how Jeff Bezos left because of the capital gains tax. So sometimes some of your policies will backfire on you. So it's being that voice in the room that can say, is that really going to work in your budget, or is that money spent going to be effective?
Okay, thank you. We'll wrap up this portion of the forum with your own questions for your opponent. And we will start with a question from Victoria for a question for Mark.
Thank you. Reproductive rights did not come up in any of the questions for our particular group this evening, and I am wondering if you would vote with the majority of our 5th Legislative District neighbors and support a woman's right to choose.
I am a solid Christian, a Bible-believing, and on that basis, I do believe that life begins at conception and should be protected until a natural end. With that said, we now know that this goes into states' rights, and states they have all sorts, the government is well designed so that just one small group or whatever cannot change things and so on. So I expect that we're going to be in our current situation for quite some time, and I'll just work with people to make the best laws they can.
Okay. Mark, you got a question for your opponent?
Mine's a little simpler. We already addressed the Climate Commitment Act, but there are 7 initiatives that we dealt with this year, and we talked about this at a previous forum. But basically, I think the initiatives are the people saying to the legislature, you messed up. We don't like what you did. We want to change this. And so therefore, we sent 7 back to the legislature. The legislature said, okay, we'll change 3. If you want police to actually chase criminals, we'll allow that. So they changed that one. They changed the 2 more. So there are 4 left that in this current one. We already talked about the one, just It'd probably be pretty straightforward answer, but do you, of course, I support all four of them because I think they speak for the will of the people. And I'd just like to know how you vote on this.
I will be opposing the 4 initiatives that are on the ballot, and I do see the initiatives as an opportunity for the people to vote on these, and I will be voting no. I believe that they provide benefits to the community, and I'm happy to speak in more detail about each one individually. Community members, please come up to me if you have any questions about why for any of the 4 initiatives. Thanks.
Okay, Lisa, question for Patrick?
Mine's also on reproductive rights. I certainly am proud to be endorsed by Planned Parenthood, and I would ask you, Mr. Peacock, if you would support a constitutional amendment that would guarantee a woman's right to choose and a woman's right to abortion and the health care services that she chooses.
There's perhaps not a single issue that divides our country more than abortion right now. It's not an issue that has been solved very well by our representative democratic process. I think whatever is done with abortion, whether or not whatever the people want to do with abortion needs to go in front of the people. We've tried to do it from executive actions. We've tried to do it from court cases, from the judicial branch, and we've gone back and forth on laws. If we do anything with abortion, it must be in the form of a referendum or an initiative so that we can go to the most direct democracy decision that we can. So my answer is no, I wouldn't want to vote either way. I would push for anything that happens with reproductive rights be put in front of the people so they can directly decide on it so that we can get past this issue and we can elect people that can be qualified for the job versus just that one issue.
Patrick, question for Lisa.
So I hear a lot about the electric economy, how it's a panacea on how to reduce carbon emissions. So we have 60, most of our electricity, well, in order to go to electrification, you're going to dramatically increase your electrical demand. 60 dams, we want to reduce those. We are shutting down a coal plant. We are from any sort of nuclear option. The power companies tell me that the only way that we can increase our capacity is through natural gas, as far as producing electricity. So my question is, how are we going to go to an electrical economy without also increasing our carbon emissions dramatically?
I appreciate the question. Well, one of it is to make sure that we've got the funding there, which means voting no on the initiative to help our state move in the direction that we need to go to. Without that kind of funding, we'll never get there. And that is putting Washington state in direct harm's way from all of the climate change that we're seeing that was listed earlier today, whether that's flooding, coastal flooding or wildfires, the bad air that we're breathing, et cetera. I think that we have to find the energy sources that we're going to need, and as we spool up, and that includes hydro, that might include nuclear. It certainly talks about how we optimize and build out our electrical grid. And so I'm looking forward to being a part of the solution and finding how each and every one of our communities can build on a pathway to get where we need to, whether you're a public utility, whether you're an individual user, and how we can change the power usages and the carbon emissions to reduce our problems, to the cleanup and the mitigation.
Thank you, candidates. Your service is very much appreciated. Our residents are lucky to have you, and good luck to each of you as you complete your campaigns. It's just a very short few weeks until Election Day.
Again, we want to thank all of the candidates for your participation in tonight's forum. The City of Issaquah's IT department and the staff have recorded tonight's forum to be replayed every day until the election on City Channel 21, streamed on the city's website, and available on the city's YouTube channel. Please tell your friends to tune in so they too can become more informed voters.
As voters, we are reminded by world events that the precious freedom we have in America, the right to vote that guarantees so many rights, comes through citizen participation. You can make a difference just by being an active, informed voter. Please remember to fill out your ballot and vote by November 5th.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.